I have been a Undertale and Deltarune fan for roughly 11 years, which, if you can count, is right when Undertale first came out. I'm at the ripe age of 19 years old, and I've spent, at this point, over half of my life somewhat unhealthily obsessing over these two games, which, by all means of games that I'm usually interested in, I should have had no interest in at all. I'm someone who has never really enjoyed primarily story-based games, with my most played game of all time being TF2. But something about Undertale and its wonderful writing and lovable characters and unique gameplay had an allure to 8-year-old me that to date I don't think I can properly express. Deltarune, I think, similarly had the same appeal, but Deltarune morphed into so much more than I think many thought it would be. A lot of people just thought it would be Undertale too. But Deltarune, I think, took every aspect of everything I've ever loved about Undertale and ramped it up to about 10,000%. But I think one thing in particular really shows the stark difference in both game storytelling. This being the weird mood. This video is intended for people who have either played the Weird Route or have watched gameplay of it in chapters 2, 4, and 5, just so you can have proper context for what I'm going to be talking about in this video. If by some miracle you haven't done either, I strongly urge you to play it yourself. I have left a spoiler-free guide in the description. Regardless, the discussion I'm trying to start with this video is maybe what we can expect next from the Snowgrave route, or the Weird Route, or Side B, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Doesn't matter to me. Chapter 5 obviously left off on a huge, giant cliffhanger with that lake scene, and I have not been able to stop thinking about what I think might come next, so I'm funneling all of it into this shitty YouTube video so you can all listen to it and tell me how cool and awesome I am. Now, I'm of the personal opinion that the whole one ending thing is kind of meaning that there's going to be multiple ways to reach the same conclusion in the story. So I think the ending for Chapter 7 Side B is going to be very similar to the ending in Chapter 7 Side A, aka the normal route, but it's going to be a different route to get there. And I think the resolution, so to say, is the ending of the story of what happened to Noelle's sister. December holiday. But in order for my thinking on the subject to make proper sense, we kind of have to address a few things first. Number 1. Des's connection to the lake. Oddly enough, there's quite a lot of either implied or explicitly stated connections between both the lake and Des. The first, funnily enough, coming from a sort of throwaway line from Onion in Chapter 2. He asks Chris if he wants to hear a secret before saying, "Sometimes I hear a song at night. Just a little piece of a song. Sounds like it's coming from under the water. Deep." If you return to the lake in Chapter 4 with Susie, she'll ask if Chris can hear something before saying, and I quote, "Sounds like somebody's playing a song out there," with the player being unable to hear it. Now, the actual narrative ties to these lines and Des is the fact that Des is one of only 2 characters in the entire game to have any meaningful connection to music, with the other one being Chris. Now, the other huge, possibly, connection between Des and the lake is an unused script that is contained within the files of every chapter that's under the name GML_global_script_unused. As I said previously, there's one of these files contained within every chapter, each version being a little different. When all 5 of them are strung together, you get the following. Where am I? Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there? Someone? Anyone? Can anyone hear me? It's dark. So dark here. Someone, and anyone, if you can hear me, say something, please. No one can hear me, can they? I guess not. To be entirely honest, I'm not even sure if I can hear myself. It's so quiet here. And yet, sometimes, I swear I hear something. Something like scratching? What is this place anyways? How did I get here? As if I already haven't asked that question a billion times already. I always did have a nightmare. Walking into the darkness with the light shining from the doorway. And the door slams behind me. Everything goes black. Is that the nightmare? Or is everything else just a dream? I'm starting to lose track of time. It's been days, hours. If someone told me it's been years, I might believe them. Before the sun came up, and so many wonderful things that happened that made time meaningful. Things like breakfast or late night TV. In this place, I don't eat or drink anymore. Can't quite tell if I'm awake or dreaming. Can't even tell if I'm dead or alive. It's just nothing but pitch black silence. Except for the noise. The scratching noise I sometimes hear. This sounds crazy, but even though no one can hear me, when I hear that noise, I feel like someone's listening. Anyone, if you're there, thank you. I do have one thing though. That's memories. Memories of my life. It's all I am at this point. Collection of memory. Then all I can do is not forget, right? Don't forget. I just have to keep telling myself that. Now, despite all the scripts being, well, creepy, the character that is implied to be Des repeatedly talks about being trapped in a dark and familiar place, as well as seeming to reference that they can hear the player going through the game files. They keep referencing scratching and feeling like somebody's listening to them. That last point will be brought up later in the video, so just keep that in the back of your brain folds. Using the references to hearing music and the like, as well as the script, you could infer that the dark, unfamiliar place has something to do with the like in question. The other important thing to address is number 2. Des is not the knight. Now, as far as I can tell, this is a somewhat controversial take within the community, just because it seems like so heavily implied that Des is supposed to be the knight. I mean, she has antlers, a vaguely wiffle ball bat-shaped looking weapon, only kidnaps characters that seem to be tangentially related to Des, an allyship with Chris, and the knight's knowledge of the code in Des' guitar. I could go on. But there are two things that really turn me off from that thought process. The first one being that none of the pieces of evidence listed are particularly indicative of specifically Des being the knight. You could take any of the evidence I just listed off and apply that to Azriel, Carol, Rudy, fucking Asgore, who gives a fuck, right? Like, it's not specifically indicative of Des. It's just the most widely accepted theory about it. So we make the narrative fit around that theory that we have. The second one being from a writing perspective. Toby Fox is obviously a fucking great writer, and I think the reason he's pointing us so heavily towards Des being the knight is so we can subvert our expectations in a later chapter. It is a very, very common writing trope for writers to direct the audience towards a particular direction in order to intentionally misdirect them and give you the opposite. Like, exactly what you think is going to happen, the exact opposite will. We all think that Des is going to be the knight. Des will end up being the knight. Now, obviously, that from a storytelling perspective doesn't make any sense, but from just a writing perspective, I think it makes perfect sense for Des to not be the knight. Now, I think with all of that established, we can reasonably put what we think could happen in the next chapter into two schools of thought. One, the next part of the weird route will literally take place at the bottom of the lake, or two, the lake and leaving hometown is a sort of a symbolic way to represent the characters leaving the game. I think the latter option has a lot more to unpack, so let's just focus on the former for now. The next part of the Weird Route story will literally take place at the bottom of the lake, or at least within a dark world at the bottom of the lake. I think the primary piece of evidence for this thought process actually comes from Flowery, because he warns the Fun Gang of a quote-unquote darkness brewing underneath hometown, seeming to imply that there is literally a dark world of some sort underneath the town, which could be interpreted as being underneath the lake. Now, admittedly, this could also be referring to the shelter, or maybe even a third option. We have no way to know yet, but I thought it was worth mentioning just for the sake of doing so. All that being said, I think the latter of the two options is A, what I believe to be true, and B, a much more interesting discussion to have, so let's go over the evidence for that. The lake and leaving hometown is a sort of symbolic way to show the characters actually leaving the realm of the game. Now, from what I can tell, I'm the first person to really speculate on what I'm about to speculate on within this manner. That being said, this is also the first video I've ever made it within this style, so if I'm a little incoherent, I'm sorry. I'm sure eventually somebody will make a much more cohesive video on the same topic, and I hope they do. But in order to properly understand this idea that I'm trying to pitch, we have to have a baseline understanding of Deltarune's device theory and Deltarune's roots theory. Device theory, in short, being the idea that Deltarune as a video game was created by someone, typically thought to be Gaster, in order to connect you, the player, through the device that is the game, to Deltarune as the universe. So Deltarune as a game isn't a simulation, but is instead an interface in which we interact with the universe that it takes place in. Roots theory, in short, being the idea that quote-unquote roots is a real location within the Deltarune universe. Both the area where you spawn spam to Neo and fight him, and the dungeon before the Shadow Mental boss are known as digital roots and bit roots, respectively, within the game files. Those are both very condensed versions of the actual theories. I'll leave much more in-depth videos in the description, which I highly encourage you to go watch if you have the chance to. Now, what exactly is it that either of these have to do with anything involved with the story? Well, if you remember the global script from earlier, Des seems to directly address that the player is digging through the code. She seems to imply that she can hear us opening up the files and actually going in and reading it. Now, there are numerous examples of Toby Fox intentionally hiding fourth wall breaking secrets within his game's files, intentionally for the players to find. The most blatant example of that being abc123.ogg, which is hidden within Undertale's files. So reasonably, it's not too far-fetched to assume that these lines are intentionally insinuating Des can legitimately hear us going through the game files. And with those lines being established, I think we can infer that the lake could be an actual in-game representation of leaving the confines of the game. Now, if we look at it realistically, and we believe device theory to be true, and device theory is something that has been circulating since the game first came out in 2018 with the original demo, the universe of a video game always has some amount of finite confines that it has to follow. There's a reason you can't just walk into the lake normally. There's nothing intended to be programmed there for you to find. There's a reason you can't just walk out of hometown, because there's nothing there. Like, the universe and the device in which we interact with the universe ends at those barriers. Like, there's a hard stop there. So what happens when our characters go past the intended barriers? What happens when they go out of bounds? Where would they end up within this game? Beyond the device, so to say. Now, obviously that's where the idea's relation to device theory comes in, but what about roots? Well, let's take a look at what we know about the actual location roots. The only two places we've ever seen it have been digital roots, which is the basement of Queen's Castle, and bit roots, which has been the dungeon in the Shadow Mantle minigames. Now, both of these have a few common denominators. One, they're both digital. Chapter 2's Dark World and Chapter 3's minigames are the only places within Deltarune we've ever actually seen a digital space of some sort. Two, they're both locations related to Image Friend, with the first appearance of him being within the basement in Chapter 2, and the second setting of him being during the ERAM minigame where he summons little friendlings to attack the player. Three, they both have very similar appearances. I think that's done intentionally, obviously. They're both dungeon-like in nature, and having nearly identical wall textures is obviously not a coincidence. Once again, there is no way, humanly possibly, that there could have been this many coincidental parallels between these two locations. They have to be tangentially related somehow. Now, what does this have to do with, well, anything? I think the fact that they're both digital recreations of somewhere speaks to something about what the actual location is meant to be. I think that it's purposely foreshadowing the fact that roots, quote unquote, is the actual roots of the game itself. I don't think roots is referring to the forest that encapsulates hometown. I think it's genuinely, legitimately referencing the actual fabric of the game that we're playing in and of itself. I mean, let's take a look at the Roots Prophecy room from Chapter 4. It's a room that many discovered accidentally while looking for the Chapter 4's egg room. It features a piece of the prophecy that simply says Roots, and one single NPC, and he says the following. Lost where the forest would grow, children followed the pointed tail. The pointed tail being commonly theorized to be a way that friend is referred to in-game. And I think all this is somewhat supposed to be a way to point to exactly how Des went missing. Now, I'm gonna piece all of my evidence together into one cohesive theory in one paragraph, and we're gonna read it, and we're gonna think it's all true, and it's gonna be true. And Toby Fox is gonna give me a medal for my valiant efforts on my shitty video game videos. Des, as a younger fellow, was led astray into the lake by the quote-unquote pointed tail. She crept farther and farther into the lake. She found herself lost within a deep, dark, untouched corner of the digital realm, never to be found again. Until that is, we, as the player, go digging around where we aren't supposed to, find her trying to make some contact with anyone to no avail. The only way to get her out being to drive Noelle to the point of near insanity, so she dragged us into the lake, connecting our window into their universe, the game itself, to the deep, dark, untouched roots of the game. Or maybe, just maybe, just got hit by a drunk Asgore. We don't know. We don't know for sure. We won't know until chapter 7. But that's my theory. That's my thoughts. I want to thank everyone that stuck around this long. I basically just made this video as a way to stop annoying my partner with my autistic ramblings about a game they don't play. So if you found that interesting, that's really cool. You should subscribe, turn notifications on, and I'm gonna keep begging for likes and shit, and I'm gonna upload more videos probably, because I really don't want to piss my partner off by not shutting up about Deltarune. Thank you guys.